Syracuse Basketball appears to be closing in on its latest transfer target.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day, and we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, Lucas Taylor is visiting the Syracuse campus as I speak right now, and by the time I post this video, he may have already committed. Lucas Taylor, a shooting guard from Georgia State, a 4-star on 247Sports. On 3 is a little bit lower on him, but still, Syracuse Basketball appears to be closing in on its latest transfer portal target. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So Lucas Taylor on today's show will go over the visit to Syracuse. Then we'll talk about some reasons why he may want to commit to the Orange, and then how I would feel if he were to not commit, because I've basically already given my thoughts on what would happen if he does commit just a couple of weeks ago. I'll leave a link in the description below when I talked about Lucas Taylor. But anyways, regarding the visit. So Lucas Taylor is a Georgia State shooting guard. He is on campus visiting the Orange today. He's got 1 year of eligibility remaining. The rumor about him to Syracuse, it all started with Naheem McLeod posting on his Instagram story and then Taylor reposting it on his own Instagram story. And I told you guys back then, that is not nothing. That means there is most likely interest with the Syracuse program and Lucas Taylor. Lo and behold, just about maybe a day later or so, Mike McAllister confirmed that Syracuse was showing heavy interest in Lucas Taylor and that they were trying to schedule a visit with him for early next month. Now, the article was written in late May, so I suggested that early next month, just a couple days ago, I believe, I suggested early next month means early June, which means right around now. Today is June 4th at the time I'm recording this, so it makes sense. They talked about it, and obviously they have now brought Lucas Taylor to campus. Taylor is a top 200 transfer overall on 247Sports, but he's ranked much lower on 3, so do with that as you will. Recruiting rankings vary all the time, transfer rankings, etc. As far as these schools that are known to have been in contact with Lucas Taylor, besides Syracuse, of course, they are TCU, West Virginia, George Mason, Arizona State, Oregon State, and St. John's. There are others as well, but those are the ones that were listed. And Lucas Taylor has been on 2 visits already during this transfer portal process. He visited TCU on May 8th. And he also visited George Mason the weekend of April 12th. I don't know exactly what day it was, but think of April 12th through the 14th, somewhere in that range, he visited George Mason. All I'm going to say with that is that there is no guarantee that just because Lucas Taylor is on campus, there's no guarantee that he is going to commit to Syracuse. Syracuse is 3 for 4 in terms of getting a transfer on campus for a visit and then getting him to ultimately commit. They got Eddie Lampkin to visit and then commit. They got Jair Davis and they got Jaquan Carlos, although we didn't even know that Jaquan Carlos was visiting. It wasn't public knowledge until he actually committed. And we saw the pictures that he had, in fact, visited. Now, the one guy that they missed out on was Dakota LeFew. LeFew had many visits. Syracuse, Villanova, obviously Georgia. There was, I think, another school that was involved. Xavier was in the mix too, I believe, but he might not have visited there. But Dakota LeFew was the first visit for Syracuse, or other way around. Dakota LeFew's first visit in the transfer portal process was to Syracuse, which is normally a positive sign, but they didn't get him. The Orange did not get him. He ended up going to Georgia, which is basically where he's from. So that makes sense. But overall, the reason why I think this is a good sign, other than the fact that he's visiting, is because it's June 4th. It's June 4th, and those visits that he had were a long time ago. The last visit he had was, that we know publicly at least, was TCU on May 8th. And before that, it was April 12th to George Mason that weekend. That's a good sign that Lucas Taylor is still available and he is still taking visits. You have to figure that if he was so committed to the other schools, he would have at least done it by now. Most players have found new homes or have stayed at their current schools or didn't pull out of the NBA draft. Lucas Taylor is still available after a couple of visits. If I had to bet on it, if I had to put money on it, I would say that Syracuse is going to land him. They've been showing interest for the last couple of weeks. It was strong interest that was reported. He's visiting campus basically a month after one school and a month after the other school. It's a positive sign that Syracuse basketball has Lucas Taylor on campus today, and hopefully they can get him. Hopefully they can get him. I did speak about earlier his fit and everything like that, so I won't get into it exactly right now. As far as the rest of this podcast coming up, I'm going to talk about the sales pitch. If I were Syracuse basketball, how would I sell Lucas Taylor coming to Syracuse? And then later on, I'm going to get to, is it really the end of the world if he doesn't commit? Because it is possible that he doesn't come, although I think he will. But if he doesn't, is it the end of the world? So tons to look forward to here on the rest of this podcast. The NBA Finals are just around the corner, and we know the Celtics will represent the East, and the Mavericks are representing the West. So we got the Celtics and the Mavericks for the NBA championship. Gametime makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier, and prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. And my favorite part is I get to see the view from my seat before I buy. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you purchase. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Had to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. A free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the streaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Welcome back, everyone, into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and on today's show, we're going over Georgia State shooting guard Lucas Taylor visiting Syracuse basketball. As I speak to you all, went over the schools that are interested and why I believe that it's a positive sign that at this point in the process, Lucas Taylor is still taking visits. And I think that Syracuse is going to get him, but it's not a guarantee. Now, if I were in the room and I were trying to sell Lucas Taylor to come to Syracuse, what is the sales pitch? What are the main points that I would try to drive home? And I came up with 4. I came up with 4 points that I would give to Lucas Taylor. So I hope Lucas Taylor is watching this or listening to this. He can if he wants. But anyways, number 1, there is a path to playing time on this team. There's a path. And I can't say the same thing about the other 2 schools that he has visited. Well, with George Mason probably, but they're not in the Power 5. And you're coming over from Georgia State. So I'd imagine you want to get back into the Power 5. And we'll get into why George Mason has a disadvantage too. But if I'm talking about TCU, really, I'm not a TCU expert. I don't know the ins and outs of that program. But what I do know is when I look at who they've added in the transfer portal, they have added 5 guards already. They've added 5 guards in the transfer portal. TCU has brought in 6 players, 5 of which are guards. Where is the playing time if Lucas Taylor commits to TCU? I don't know. He's going to have to battle it out with the other 5 players that they brought in. At Syracuse, I can't see how he would be a starter barring injury. But there is a path to playing time on this team. You got J.J. Starling as the starting shooting guard. But Lucas Taylor probably fights with Elijah Moore to be the backup, especially if it takes Elijah Moore time to really build up his confidence and to start knocking down his three-point shot. Lucas Taylor's probably a more well-rounded player at this point than Elijah Moore, and that's not a bad thing. Lucas Taylor only has 1 year of eligibility left. He's a senior. It makes sense why he would be a better basketball player right now than Elijah Moore, who's a true freshman, low-end 4-star recruit. So he's probably the primary backup shooting guard. And I believe he can also rotate in as a small forward. He's not really a point guard, even though he is a good passer. But he could slot in maybe as the 3 every once in a while on the lineup, right? One of the combinations that I wrote here for a small ball lineup would be Jaquan Carlos, J.J. Starling, Lucas Taylor at the 3, Jair Davis at the 4, and Donnie Freeman at the 5. So that would be an example of a smaller lineup that Syracuse can run. And obviously, Lucas Taylor is on the floor. I believe there is a path, while it's not a guarantee, that Lucas Taylor sees upwards of 15 minutes a game. I believe it is certainly on the table. He's going to have to fight for it. It's not a guarantee. But unlike a school like TCU, I believe there is playing time available on Syracuse basketball's roster for Lucas Taylor. Next, this is kind of not really suggesting ill will, but Lucas Taylor started his career at Wake Forest, and obviously they're ACC opponents. Syracuse is playing Wake Forest this season, albeit at home, but it's a little bit of a chance to, you can call it what you want. Is it a revenge game, a chance to kind of stick it to them? All I know is that what athletes will tell you is that when they're playing an opponent when they're playing a team they used to play for, they usually say, it's any other game. It's not. They're lying. It's not any other game when you're playing a team that you used to play for. And Lucas Taylor used to play for Wake Forest. So it's a chance to maybe show what he can do against a school that used to have him. He didn't play all that much on Wake Forest, and he's from the area. A chance to kind of stick it to him, if you will. It's not suggesting ill will, that they left on harsh terms or anything like that. But hey, wouldn't it feel good if you committed to Syracuse and Wake Forest comes to the Dome and you drop 15 points on your former team and lead Syracuse to a victory? I think that would feel pretty good. And you're not going to be able to do that at George Mason or at TCU, but you can for Syracuse. And who knows, maybe they'll play in the ACC tournament so you can do it again. Point being, chance to stick it to Wake Forest. So those are the first 2 reasons for a sales pitch, right? Or those are the first 2 points of the sales pitch. There's a path to playing time and a little bit of a revenge game against Wake Forest, if you will. Number 3 and number 4, really, are the 2 biggest X factors that it's tough to objectively say this is going to happen. But I imagine if you are a Syracuse basketball coach or in the administration, you would have a better idea than I would. I spoke about how D1 athletes, particularly in football and men's basketball, at Power 5 programs are semi-professionals. They are no longer just kids. They are semi-professional athletes because the NCAA and the Power 5 conferences reached a settlement, which is going to allow Power 5 programs to pay their players directly, meaning the players are going to start earning paychecks for playing basketball, football, or whatever sport the school decides upon, but chances are men's basketball and football are going to get the most amount of money. So for Lucas Taylor, this could happen next season, pending the approval from a judge on the settlement. It could happen as early as next year, which would mean bye-bye George Mason in that regard. I don't believe George Mason is included in that. I did mention how other conferences will probably opt into the program in terms of paying players, but that was mainly talking about schools like the Big East and UConn and Marquette and all those schools, not a school like George Mason that's also in pursuit of Lucas Taylor. Salaries, Syracuse can possibly offer him a salary of 6 figures. He's not going to be able to get that at George Mason in all likelihood. Just saying. That's number 3. And number 4 is the biggest wild card, which is NIL money. Because it comes down to 2 factors. Can Syracuse offer more than any other school that are pursuing? And number 2, will they offer more than any other school that's pursuing? Those are the questions. Because I have no doubt that Syracuse basketball can offer more NIL opportunities for their players than a school like George Mason that Lucas Taylor's already visited. The question is, because Syracuse has more or has 10 players on the roster and have more marquee players because they're Syracuse, can they offer more or will they offer more money than a school like George Mason, where Lucas Taylor might be the best player if he goes to George Mason? So he would probably get a lot of money to be the best player. It's close. I don't know. But that's my point. If Syracuse is willing to pony up the money, I see no reason why Lucas Taylor wouldn't commit to Syracuse. So those are the 4 reasons of the sales pitch I would give to Lucas Taylor to come to Syracuse. There is a path to playing time. There's a path. A chance to get a little bit of revenge, if you will, on Wake Forest, a school that he played for 2 years. Didn't do a whole lot there before having a better year at Georgia State, kind of blossomed. Number 3, the possibility of getting a salary. That's big. And number 4, NIL money. Those are the 4 factors. Those are the 4 reasons. So now coming up, if Lucas Taylor doesn't commit to Syracuse and Syracuse misses out on another transfer portal target, is it the end of the world for this team? Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Hello, everyone, and welcome back into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and on today's show, we have gone over Lucas Taylor visiting the Syracuse campus today, the schools that are interested in him, and why I am fairly confident that Taylor is going to be committing to Syracuse in the near future. The fact that he is still taking a visit to the Orange, even though he has already taken 2, and they happened one a month ago and the other 2 months ago, is a positive step that Syracuse, that has already been known to have been showing heavy interest in Lucas Taylor, is probably going to get him. It's not guaranteed, but I'm fairly confident they're going to land him. I then gave you guys the 4 reasons or the sales pitch to Lucas Taylor if I were in the room. And just to go over them again, it was that there's a path to playing time on this team next season, which you can't really say the same for a school like TCU that has brought in a bajillion guards in the transfer portal. Look at that. They just brought in another one. Just kidding. They haven't, but you get the idea. They just keep adding guards. There's a chance to also, not suggesting ill will once again, but to, stick it to Wake Forest, if you will, because he used to go there. And obviously, being at Syracuse, they're going to play him this year. And numbers 3 and 4 really were salary related, one coming directly from Syracuse because of the new settlement. And also NIL money. Can Syracuse offer more? Will they offer more? If the answer is yes, then it's a pretty no-brainer decision as to where to play next season, and that's to Syracuse. So now it's time to get into the possibility, because it's not guaranteed. If he doesn't commit to Syracuse, is it the end of the world? And my answer is no, and it's because Lucas Taylor is a fine option, in my opinion, to come off the bench for this team next season. I believe he would be the backup shooting guard. I really went more into his role and everything on a podcast I did a couple weeks ago solely about him. So I'll leave a link in the description below for that one if you want to learn more about Lucas Taylor. He averaged 15 points a game. I know that, but he probably wouldn't do that at Syracuse next season. He's a fine depth piece. You would add to the guard rotation, insurance on Elijah Moore. I get all of that. But I would be a little bit annoyed. I would be a little bit annoyed if they couldn't get him because it's so late in the process. It's June 4th, and there are still options that are available. It's not like nobody is there. There are some that haven't committed, but most of them have. And Syracuse still has 3 open scholarships remaining, and I've basically been saying that since mid-April. It's been a long, long time that Syracuse hasn't filled out a spot on its roster. Really since the Jaquan Carlos edition. That's it. Right? It appeared that they were also going to get Dakota LaFew, and then he decided to take his talents to Georgia. It's not the end of the world because of the ability of Lucas Taylor. They're not missing out on a guy like Jameer Watkins or anything like that. Like, that would really sting if you couldn't land a guy like him or Coleman Hawkins. Some of the top transfers that are still available. If Syracuse really had a pressing need and couldn't get one of those top guys, Lucas Taylor is more of a depth piece that would be nice to have. But if I'm being 100% honest with you guys, is he really going to be the main difference between Syracuse making the tournament and not making the tournament? I would say probably not. He would certainly help, but he's not going to move the needle for this roster. It would just be annoying because I can't speak for you guys, but I can speak for myself. I would like to see some clarity with this roster for next year. We still have 3 open scholarships remaining. Where's the clarity? How are we going to fill them? Are we going to fill them? I don't know. I have a feeling that they're going to at least add in one more player. So it would be nice if they can just fill it with Lucas Taylor, and then we can move on to a starting combo guard, another player on the wing, or perhaps even a third-string center, because that's definitely a need for Syracuse right now. Not the biggest need in the world, and if they were to go into next year without one, I wouldn't say that they're screwed. Right? You wouldn't say that because Syracuse doesn't have Peter Carey on its roster next year that they're screwed, but it would be nice to have a third-string center on the team. I don't think, by the way, that William Patterson is an option because recently Mike McAllister said on Cuse Sports Talk that doesn't appear that the two sides are going to reunite. So probably no William Patterson. The point being is that if you can get Lucas Taylor, then you got some clarity. Then you can kind of move on and you can focus on other things to the roster. Instead, if you don't get them, now you're back at 3. And it's just kind of this demoralizing, might be the wrong way to put it, but it's just annoying. It's just annoying. I would like to see them filled. And hopefully they get them filled soon because it's early June. And we're not out of time, but we're running out of time. Those are my thoughts on if Lucas Taylor doesn't commit, is it the end of the world? It's not the end of the world, but I would certainly be annoyed. And leave a comment below. What do you guys think? Would you be annoyed if Lucas Taylor doesn't commit? And by the way, it's not a personal thing to Lucas Taylor. I'm speaking from a Syracuse perspective that you want him, but Lucas Taylor's going to make the decision that is best for himself, right? So if he doesn't commit, he can do what he wants. I just hope that Syracuse is able to land him. Nice depth option off the bench. That's what he is. You fill another spot. You can focus on other things. That's what I got. Now, as far as future episodes for the podcast, obviously, we'll keep tabs on if and when Lucas Taylor does commit to Syracuse. Fingers crossed that he does. I'm fairly confident it's going to happen. I want it to happen. It's time. Let's get another guy in there. After that, what I originally had planned today, before knowing that there was a visit involved, was I was going to break down a position group for Syracuse football for next season. I won't tell you which one, but I do have that planned as well to go over each position group on the team. So there's still plenty of content to look forward to on the Locked On Syracuse podcast. But as far as this one is concerned, that is it. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, click that like button. If you really liked it, subscribe to the channel and turn on those notifications so you know right away when I'm dropping the next podcast. And guys, hopefully Syracuse basketball can land its 11th player on the roster in Lucas Taylor pretty soon.